Hello, and thanks for joining the webinar today. My name is Emily Bradley, and I am part of Medit's training and education team. And we're really excited about this webinar, and we're grateful that you chose to tune into it. We're actually going to cover Medit's new Splint app, and you're going to see how quickly and simply you can create a splint. And as we go through this process, you're going to see there's two options. You can manually create the splint, and you can actually do an auto creation. Now, those of you who have been using Medit Design app to create your splint, you're going to see how much more user-friendly this splint is, or this app is to create a splint. You'll see the workflow spelled out really simply for you at the top of the screen. Before we jump into this and get started, I just wanted to remind everybody that this webinar is being recorded, and this recording will be made available on all of Medit's education outlets shortly after the recording goes live. And that being said, I'm going to go ahead and turn my camera off so that we can actually see full screen here as I do this demonstration. Over here, you'll see that we're in Medit's link. I've actually pre-scanned a model here. And over on this side, this is our app box. This is where you're going to go to install all the apps that you might want to use. You're going to see that Medit has a great ecosystem of applications that are designed to make your life easier. We're going to be doing a lot of webinars kind of in follow-up to this one, where we focus on each individual app, so please tune into those. And you're going to see how each application is designed to help make your life easier in your clinic. Let's go ahead and get started. So we've got the model here, and I'm going to just go up to the top of the screen here and click Medit Splints. We're going to open up the Medit Splint application here. You'll see I can either choose to learn more about the app or continue working. If you click to learn more about the app, you'll see that there's a video to watch. So there's generally information you can read about any of the applications, kind of help train you a little bit and help you understand how to use it. For the sake of this demonstration, we're going to continue working. You can see here how first off, we've got to design or assign the data. So maxilla and mandible are assigned here. We'll confirm. You're going to choose which arch you would like to build the splint on. We're going to go with the maxilla. And then here's our two options, what I was talking about a little bit earlier. We can do an auto creation, which we're going to wrap this webinar up with. So this will be what we show you at the end. And for this one, we're going to do the manual creation. But even then, you're going to see how simple the process is. So we'll start with this one here and confirm. Okay, so we've got the model here opened in our Medit Splint application. Our first step, you're going to follow right along the top of the screen, is edit mode. Go ahead and click edit mode, and you'll see that it opens up tools here at the bottom of the screen. These tools allow me to make adjustments to the model. I can fill holes if I want to at this point in time. You can see that polyline trim tool is highlighted, so I'll just show you here really quick. If you want to clean up the model a little bit more, you can go ahead and do that. I'd say this model is pretty clean, so we're going to move on to the next step. Okay, so we've got alignment mode here. Now this one's pretty exciting, so I'm just going to click it. You're going to see how this is the first time our developers have used the AI or artificial intelligence to automatically align the model. So you can also use the point alignment here offered at the bottom of the screen, but you'll see how it comes right into alignment for you automatically, which saves a lot of time. And then we'll just keep moving right along the top of the screen as the workflow is here, you'll see. Occlusal adjustment mode is our next step. Okay, so this one's kind of interesting. So this one's going to be, we thought of the best way to maybe demonstrate this for you. You've got bite opening and we have distance to antagonist. And I think the best option or way to show you this is I'm actually going to pull up a picture so you understand. So part of our process is we're going to set the distance to the antagonist. And I'm going to pull this picture up here really quickly. So this is where you can see bite opening. You can set this in millimeters here as the option was that you saw in our Splint app. And this back here, right here between the upper and lower, the maxilla and the mandible, this is the distance to the antagonist. Okay, so the shortest distance to the antagonist. So this area, this is the area that we're actually going to be setting right here. I'll go ahead and pull up my app again. So distance to the antagonist, and if you're following along here, I'm going to set this, you can see it was already preset because I've done this before, 1.5 millimeters. Okay, so when I adjust this, it also adjusts the bite opening. So these kind of go hand in hand, but we're going to focus on the distance to the antagonist right here. And that's how much we're opening it up here in the posterior. So once we've set that, and I hope that made sense with that picture that we just showed, our next step is going to be the inner surface creation mode. go ahead and click here and we'll just keep moving on. Okay, so we've got a few options here with the inner surface creation mode. Really quickly though, I just wanted to touch on, if we were to go back here to the occlusal adjustment mode, maybe this is a simpler way to understand it, and I kind of wanted to touch on this before we actually move past this. The bite opening will be managed through basically the distance through the antagonist, as we kind of mentioned here. So basically, in other words, you can manage the occlusal thickness of the splint by managing the distance from the antagonist. So if I was to open that really wide, that is actually going to create a thicker splint. So for now, at this point here, we're on the inner surface creation mode. I just wanted to mention that, so hopefully that made a little bit more sense there. Inner surface creation mode. So we've got a few options here. Kind of based on the material that you would choose to make your splint. So there's softer material, there's harder material, is going to be what you set your inner surface offset at. Now, just so you understand a little bit about what the offset is, it's basically how much space we want between the surface of the teeth and the splint. If it's going to be a hard material, you're going to add a little bit more offset because there's less give there. But if we were going with a really soft splint material, you could actually reduce the offset a little bit because there's more give to the material and it's going to be a little bit more retention in the mouth. But for the sake of the webinar, we're gonna say we're going with a little bit harder material. So you'll hear it, see here at the bottom, I can enter the number. Again, I'm gonna do 0.1. And that's going to be the space between the splint material and the surface of the teeth. And then our smooth, this is going to be, we're talking about the smoothest surface, the inner surface. Now you've got to be careful with this one a little bit because you don't want to over smooth the inner surface and lose retention of that splint. If it was a soft material we were using, I would probably drop smoothest surface down a little bit further, but you've got 5 options here on smoothness. And so because it's a little bit harder material that we're going to go with, we're going to bump it up to 4 here, which it was already. And you'll see once you go through this the first time and you're doing it manually, you set your defaults, they'll be there the next time you come through, but you can always make adjustments as well. And then we've got the angle here. So I can either set basically to set to the arrow, my viewpoint to the arrow. I can kind of get this situated where I can see maybe equal amounts of the buccal and lingual surfaces to make sure that I'm blocking out those undercuts. And really that's just so that we can make sure that you can put the splint in the mouth without any resistance and take it out without resistance. So those undercuts, you're not bumping into issues with those. So if we're going to block out anything over contoured, the bigger the angle, the looser it's going to be. So if I was going to actually drag this all the way to the right, we'd have a pretty like a loose splint here. And then the less of the angle that we're going to use here, the tighter the splint's going to be. So we're going to keep it kind of lower here at the bottom. You can check your preview here if you wanted to just see what it looked like with all the undercuts blocked out. And then we'll just keep moving. So basically, once you set these defaults, they're good to go. They stay there unless you want to adjust them later. Okay, so our next step is outline designation mode. Go ahead and click this next step here. And you're going to see that in this mode, it actually draws basically the splint on the teeth. And then you're given flexibility as to where you want that line to move to. So if you want to cover a little bit more of the buccal or lingual surface, you can just move that line. So here we go. It automatically throws that line about through the middle of the teeth, you'll see right here. So on our labial and buccal surfaces here, I'm pretty happy with where that line is. Now, if I rotate over to the lingual, you'll see that we've got a little bit more gingiva covered through here. Now, in most cases, you're going to see that the lingual surface is a little thicker on the splints because this is basically the biting surface of the splint. We know where that mandible is going to occlude, and we want to make sure that we're creating a splint that's strong enough that if that patient was a major bruxer, they're not going to break it immediately the first night they wear it. So you'll see here, I can either use this slider bar and I can add more to the lingual as I go, or I can take a little material away there as well. Again, it's preference on how you prefer to design your splints. I can also grab a hold of one of these little balls in the line here, and I can actually move the splint line accordingly. So if you wanted to move it up and really shape it to the contour of the gingiva or the teeth there, you could. Okay. So our next step, we're going to keep on moving, our outer surface creation mode. And again, it's a really quick process. Each one of these steps should be really quick. You don't need to linger on any step too long. So let's go ahead and click our next step, our outer surface creation. So what you're going to see, we've created the inner surface. We've actually set the offset. Again, that's the space between the splint and the teeth so that we can easily remove that splint if we want to. And also setting the smoothness on the inside. But you got to be careful and make sure that you're not losing retention in the process and you're over smoothing. This step here allows us to adjust the thickness of the lingual and buccal surfaces and also how smooth we want it. Now, this is already bumped all the way to the right. You'll see that I went through it before and my defaults are set here. Now, again, for the sake of the webinar, let's go ahead and leave it at 1.5. So you can either grab this slider bar here and adjust it, make this thicker if you want to, or you can obviously make it thinner. And we want this to be nice and smooth so it's comfortable for the patient. So if I hadn't have already set my defaults earlier, I would make the adjustments here and then keep on moving. Now you may say, okay, I want to really add some reinforcement to this lingual surface to make sure that it's strong. I know this patient's a major bruxer. At this point in time, you can move on to the next step, and that's going to be design mode. We'll go ahead and click there. So you see you've got options here. We've got sculpting options where I can basically add or I can remove. I also have the option here of adapt to the antagonist. So I can just automatically click adapt to the antagonist. And the whole point here, I think that's important to understand, is what we want to do is make sure there's even distribution of the bite along the splint. You'll see that some teeth, you'll see the kind of our map, the color map over here. If you have one area that was really red, you'll know that you're carrying a lot of load on one tooth, and that's eventually going to get very uncomfortable for the patient. So you can see here, if I click switch deviation display area, you can see here where we're contacting along the splint. It looks like it's pretty evenly distributed. We want to make sure this is really comfortable in the patient's mouth. But what I can do, I can remove here, let's say our brush strength, I can control this here, and the brush size. So I can make the size larger or smaller there by just using that slider. And I can go through here and I can kind of swipe it across and I can remove a little material. So again, if I had a really high area listed over here, maybe as a yellow, orange, red, I can get rid of that so that actually everything else comes into kind of a overall even pressure on that splint, basically. So that's our goal, is just to make sure that it's comfortable, that we're not over biting, and that we have an even distribution. So again, you can add or take away using the sculpting tools here, or what we can do is just click adapt to antagonist. So we'll go ahead and turn that off here. And we're going to adapt to antagonist. And then you can control here how many millimeters. We'll leave it right around 22 here. And that will automatically adapt it to the antagonist so that you know that that patient's not going to be uncomfortable. There'll be an even distribution of the biting surface here. You can see the marks there as you go. And our last step, labeling mode. Go ahead and click that. And you'll see how simple this is. So you can actually change your label here. So let's go ahead and I'm going to maybe delete this. Let's call this, for the sake of the webinar here, we'll do it Emily's splint. Okay, so I can determine the size of the label, which is right here, you'll see here in just a moment, and the depth. So this little option here gives us an option for embossing and engraving. I suggest you go with engraving here just because it's going to be more comfortable for the patient. And we'll place this on the splint wherever you want it. If you see orange, a little bit of orange in the writing there, I just want to pull it to the side here and show you how if the letters go orange, it means they're not in a good position to print. So you're going to want to actually move it so the number or the letters are blue. And then here you could add another label if you wanted to. And again, for the patient's comfort, we're going to go with engraving rather than embossing, so it's actually smoother on the surface. And from there, we're just going to click complete here at the top right-hand side of the screen. So you'll see our workflow. We've just followed step by step along. This is going to put us back into, we'll save it as Splint app. This is going to put us back in our Medit link. So you'll see that Splint application opens or closes. And let's go ahead and open our Medit link here. So here we've got our splint. Okay, so before we move on to auto creation, what I want to show you is basically how easy this is to send onto your 3D printer. So we've got the splint here. You can see that all our options are over here on the side, and we've got our apps here at the top of the screen. So what we're going to do is just select our Formlab app, and I'm going to unselect what I don't want to print. So we're going to do the Splint STL and send to preform, just like that. We'll click that and it sends it off and we're good to go. So I want you to see how simple that was, how quick this process is. So if you thought that process was pretty quick, we're going to go ahead and close out of that. What I'm going to do is go back up to Medit Splint app. So we already saw the manual process, so how you actually design it, set your defaults and so forth. What we're going to do now is we're going to do auto creation. Open this, again, learn more or continue working. We're going to continue working. So right here, you'll see that we already built a splint for this case. So generally in the clinic, you're only going to build one splint per case. Because I want to create a new splint, I'm going to press cancel. I don't want to continue working with the case or the splint that I was already working with. We've got the maxilla and mandible assigned here. And then we're going to, again, create the splint on the maxilla. And here is our new option. We're going to create or use auto creation. So I'll go ahead and select that. You'll see it's highlighted. And you're going to see how quickly this process comes together. Okay, so this is exciting because, as I said earlier, I would suggest you first go through this process, set your defaults manually, and then when you use auto creation, it's going to use those same defaults each time. So we're going to let this create the splint automatically kind of finish up here, and you're going to see how quick this is. Really, truly, I just clicked the one-click automatic creation, and you're going to see our splint here is basically done. We'll give it a second. There we go. So that's designed basically off of the defaults I set earlier. And if you wanted to go in and make adjustments, you still have this option at the top of the screen. Let's say I was going to go to outline designation mode. As soon as I click here, it will actually clear the information from here on out. So if you wanted to go back and make adjustments, it'll start making the adjustments at the point where you, which stage you clicked on. Since the splint is basically complete, what I'm going to do here is just label it. We're going to finish this up. So let's go ahead. On this one, we'll just make this a little bit less writing here. So we'll just do splint app. That's what we'll do for our label. Again, you can change the size and you can also change the depth. Again, I always suggest to engraven just so it's a little bit more comfortable for the patient. You can move this anywhere on the splint. You don't need to leave it right here on the lingual surface. Also, as I mentioned earlier, you can add an extra label or if you choose to. So that's it. You saw how quickly that is. We went from auto creation to adding the label just like that. And again, I suggest you go through the manual process first, follow the steps at the top of the screen. Set your defaults, and then it's very simple from there on out. Really in 2 clicks, you can actually have the splint completed. Again, I just kind of want to touch on a little bit, that's what's really exciting, is the kind of the beauty of the automation here and the auto creation, how quickly this happens. And the fact that you're seeing the AI, artificial intelligence coming out when it comes to placing the model on those occlusal planes and how quickly this process is becoming. As I mentioned earlier, Medit is really focusing on creating an ecosystem that's very, very simple and easy to use in the clinic. And it also helps you with case presentations and so forth. So again, tune into our upcoming webinars. We'll be working with some of our really special KOLs to offer you content regarding applying those Medit applications in your clinic. The fastest and easiest and simple ways to do it, and the ways that are going to most impress the patients as well. Thanks again for tuning in. We're excited to be working with you and look forward to seeing you on future webinars. Have a great day. Bye-bye.